Hello, Year 8. So we are steaming into our second lesson on the Civil War. I hope you all enjoyed the first lesson. Obviously, it was the research task. So the first thing I want to say, guys, if you haven't done the research task and you're sitting there thinking, I didn't even open that, Miss West, you're going to find this lesson a bit tricky and a tad confusing. So you might want to go back and look at the research task, okay? So green box reminder as well, again for today, okay? Please make sure you keep all of your work safely together. Title for today, guys, is The Key Events of the Civil War. Lesson objective is to know the key events in the American Civil War and what the outcome was. And then we have got three key words here. So we have got the word Confederates or Confederacy. It's a long word, but all it means is the name given to the southern states, so what they called themselves, and their soldiers. All right. Unionist and Union, northern states and their soldiers. And then we've got this big, long double key word, which is super, super important, okay? Emancipation Proclamation. All right, and that was the official announcement that slaves were free. So if you think about this whole unit, we've been looking at slavery, this Emancipation Proclamation, okay, was the most important thing to happen in this whole unit we've been studying, okay? It ended slavery in America. So emancipation, to emancipate someone means to free them. And a proclamation means a piece of information, a piece of text, a piece of writing. All right, so if you can get all of that down for me. So just a very quick recap here, just to make sure that you guys know the context and you know where it is that we are at. So we have got the dates of the Civil War. So the time period that we're talking about is 1861 to 1865, okay? So that is the dates of the American Civil War. So 61 to 65. The name of the northern states, as I just said there, it was one of our keywords, okay? So the northern states were called the Union, all right? And the southern states were called the Confederate states, all right? The main cause of the Civil War, you should all know this now, it's linked to what we have been doing in this whole unit, the main cause of it. And had we been in class, we would have looked at a lot of different causes within slavery, but the main cause of it was slavery. All right, so it was the southern states wanting to keep slavery, and it was the northern states saying, hang on, no, we don't really want slavery, we don't want to become slave states. So that was what they fell out over, okay? And who was president? Very, very famous American president, Abraham Lincoln. All right, so hopefully you guys have got some of those correct, which would be fantastic. So we're going to move straight into what you're going to do today. It's super interesting, all right? I think you guys will actually really enjoy it. Not as interesting or as fun as it would have been if we'd done it in lesson, because again, I've had to change it so that you guys can access it at home. However, still really, really interesting. So there are going to be 12 different slides that I'm going to go through, okay? But as we move through each different slide, it just gives a little bit of information about a different battle that took place during the Civil War or an important event that took place during the Civil War. So for each one, there is a little box of information, okay? All you need to do is write down on a piece of paper for all 12 as we go through them, the name of the event or the battle, the date that it took place, where it took place, so if it was in a Confederate state, so a southern state, or a Union state, so a northern state, and what the outcome was, if there is one. Some of them don't have outcomes because they're events, they're not necessarily battles. All right, so by outcome, we mean who won that particular battle. All right, so we'll get straight into it. And just pause me when you need to and note down the information for each slide as we go through. And I'll just read through the other information on the slide. Okay, so we are starting right at the start of the American Civil War. We know it started in 1861. So we're going in chronological order, okay? Time order. So the first we've got that you need to write down is that this was the Battle of Bull Run. Okay, you can see a picture there from the Battle of Bull Run. July 21st, 1861. it happened in the state of Virginia. And if you look at the little map underneath, that bit that's highlighted in red in the map, that is the state of Virginia. So there will be a map for all of the states as we go through. Okay, and Virginia was a southern state, so it was part of the Confederacy. And the outcome, the Confederates, so the southern states won. And again, if you look below that, you'll see the Confederate flag there, and I've put the winner across it. All right, and that's the same on every slide. So it's super easy for you guys to understand. So you just need to write down the name of the battle, when it took place, where, and what the outcome of it was. Okay? All right, our second battle took place at Shiloh. Okay, Shiloh. And again, we've got a picture of that particular battle there, well, a painting of that particular battle there. April 1862, and it took place in Tennessee. And you can see Tennessee highlighted on the map there again. That's in the south. All right, so it's a Confederate state. And the outcome, the Union Army won this battle. All right, and the key info for me to give you here is the Confederates could not stop Union forces from crossing the Mississippi River, which is a huge river that goes across those states. That's what the Confederates wanted to do, and they failed. The Union forces got over to the other side, hence the Union forces won. So we have got our battle at Antietam and Sharpsburg next, okay? So September the 17th, 1862. It took place in Maryland. You can see that highlighted there on your map. And that was a Union state. You can see on your map that it's in the top half of the country, all right, which is one of the northern states. Remember, the South is at the bottom. It was a Union victory, so the Union Army won, and that was because the Confederate forces surrendered. So if you have a look at the flag at the bottom there, a little white flag on it as well. A white flag is what gets waved in a war when one side wants to surrender, traditionally, okay? So the Union Army did win, but that was only because the Confederate forces surrendered. Your key info for this, and again, you don't need to write this down, guys. This is just the key info for me to tell you. It was the bloodiest battle of the Civil War. 22,717 men were killed. And this led to President Lincoln releasing the Emancipation Proclamation, which is that announcement that the slaves were free. And we're going to talk about that on the next page. All right, so this is our next thing. You do need to note this down. It's not a battle, okay? This is an event that happened. So the Emancipation Proclamation. So January the 1st, 1863. It was an executive order of President Lincoln that freed all slaves in states that were rebelling against the federal government. So all of the southern states, all of the slaves there were now free. Many blacks in the South left to join the Union Army, as this wasn't applicable until a slave state had been taken by Union forces. Okay, so lots of blacks left, went north and joined the Union Army to fight against the slaves in the South, okay? Because it would only become, slavery in a particular state was only banned when the state had been taken over by the Union Army. So a lot of blacks, now they were free, left and joined the Union Army in an effort to help get rid of slavery in the South, okay? And that is how we come to the idea that the Union Army then saw their role in this Civil War. They said, well, now what we want to do is we want to completely eliminate slavery. Okay, so just note down the Emancipation Proclamation and the date for this one. That's all you need to pop down. And we are back to our battles now. Okay, so we have got the Siege of Vicksburg. The Siege of Vicksburg, May 19th to July the 4th. So this was long, okay? This is lasting about, what, 6 weeks, okay? 7 weeks, actually, maybe. So this is a really, really long siege. It took place in Mississippi, all right, which is a Confederate state. You can see on your map there in red, it's at the bottom, okay? So it's in the South, so it's a southern state. And it was a Union victory, so the Union Army were victorious. And our key info, Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas, which are 3 other American states, they actually decide to split off from the rest of the Confederacy. They remove themselves. Now, Texas, if you look on that map of America, Texas is that huge, big state at the bottom, really, really big. So because they split off from the Confederacy, that meant any men living in Arkansas, Louisiana, and Texas that had been in the army were no longer in the army. They removed themselves from it. So the Confederates lost quite a lot of men because of this. Next battle, we have got Chancellorsville. So April 20th to May 6th. Okay, so it's about 3 weeks there. So again, pretty long in time. Took place in Virginia, which we know is a Confederate state, all right? It's a southern state. And the Confederates won, all right? They were victorious here. Key info, the leader of the Confederate Army, a guy called General Lee, it was his best ever battle. He performed really, really well in it. Now, we have got the battle at Gettysburg. Gettysburg. Now, if you did your research task, the word Gettysburg might be a bit familiar to you. So it took place July the 1st to the 3rd, so 2 days long, 1863, in Virginia, which we know again is a Confederate state. And there's been quite a few battles happening in Virginia because if you look at where Virginia is, it's really in the middle between the North and the South. It's a southern state, but it sits right on the border with the North. So that's why a lot of the fighting took place there. So key info, that Confederate leader again, General Lee, it was his last battle and his last attempt to try and invade the North from Virginia. And it was a really, really major turning point in the Civil War. Okay, the Union won, so it was a really important battle. So the Northern states won. We move on now to Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. So this took place a few months after that battle at Gettysburg, okay, which is why it's called the Gettysburg Address, all right, because he really wanted to thank all of the men that had been in that battle because it was a big turning point in the war. So it took place at a cemetery in Pennsylvania, and you can see Pennsylvania there, okay, it's sort of above New York, that's very much in the north part of the country, and it was a Union state. And it was a cemetery because it was where victims from the Gettysburg battle were buried. So that's why he chose to do it there, okay? This is one of the most famous speeches in the whole of US history, guys, all right? The opening sentence where it says 77 years ago, that was what I asked you to look at in your research task. And score means 20. Okay, so score is an old-fashioned word for the number 20. So 4 20s, so 4 times 20 is 80, and 7, so 87 years ago, he said, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation. So he's referring to way back 87 years ago when America signed that Declaration of Independence from Britain, when they signed that bit of legislation that said we don't want to be owned by Britain anymore. We want to be our own nation. So that's what he is referring to. Okay, and I guarantee if you walk into any American school, they would know this speech, mostly off by heart. All right, it's a very, very famous speech. So please make sure that you've noted down Lincoln's Gettysburg Address and the date of it. You don't need to write where it took place, but you do need to write down the date. Okay, we are getting towards the end of the Civil War now. I'm sure you'll be happy to know, guys. So we have got the Battle of the Wilderness. So 5th to 7th of May, so 2 days, 1864. Took place again in Virginia, so that Confederate state, which, as I said, is on the border between the South and the North, which is why so much took place there. Now, the outcome of this was inconclusive. That means there was no winner. All right, so no winner for this one, inconclusive. And the key info, it was the first time that the generals of both armies had actually met in battle. Okay. And we have now got the Battle of Cold Harbor. All right, May to June. Okay, so it's lasting 13 days, so just under 2 weeks. Again, long time. Virginia again is taking place in, all right. And the outcome, the Confederates win. All right, so the Southern Army win. And the key info for this, it was General Lee, the guy that had performed really well before. This was actually his last battle. And the Union Army, so the Northern Army, they lost lots of men at this battle. So it was a really bad loss for them. And if my memory serves, guys, we only have 2 more to go. This one and one more. So we've got the Battle of Atlanta. All right, so July the 22nd, 1864, it took place in Atlanta, Georgia, okay, which, by the way, is my favourite state because it's the same as my name. So it's a great state. So Atlanta, Georgia, it was a Confederate state. It's a southern state. Okay, and actually, I'm just noticing on the map there, guys, a little bit of an error. That is highlighted, that is Virginia, highlighted in red there. Georgia is actually down at the bottom. Hang on, I'm just going to show you guys where it is. Georgia is this one. So sorry, that's my mistake there. Okay, so that is Georgia. That isn't the Virginia picture. I've obviously not changed it. But it was a Union victory, so the Union Army win. Okay, key info, the outcome of this led to President Lincoln being elected to be president again. Because remember, in America, you can only be president for 4 years, and then people have to vote again, just like they just did with Donald Trump again, okay, and he lost, so he's no longer the president. So this led to Lincoln being voted for again. And if any of you have noticed, what's interesting here is that all of the other pictures are paintings. This is a photograph. Now, the Civil War was the first conflict or war in the whole history of the world to be photographed because cameras had started to be invented. Okay, so it's the first picture of a dead soldier, the first photograph of a dead soldier came from the American Civil War. All right, so I think it's really interesting that this is randomly a photograph when you've been looking at paintings previously. Okay, so this is our final slide for everything that has happened during the Civil War. So we are now at the Appomattox Courthouse, okay, April 9th, 1865. And you can see in the picture there, it's taking place in Virginia, again, that important Confederate state. The outcome, the Confederates, so the southern states, are surrendering. They realise they have lost. The Union Army has defeated them. So the guy in the beige coat, okay, is the Southern Army surrendering. The general of the Southern Army, he's signing a document to say, okay, we surrender. And he's being watched there by the leader of the Union Army. All right, and all the Union men are wearing their blue uniforms. So this ended the war, okay? It ended the war in Virginia, that stopped everything. And as soon as they started to surrender, other Confederate states, so other southern states, start to surrender as well. So the fighting begins to stop, okay? So they hear what's happening. Oh, hang on, we've surrendered. We need to stop fighting now. All right, so the Confederate states, the southern states in America, lose the Civil War. So what I would like you to do, guys, for your task, and you can see there's a picture of the phone there because I would like you to send me this. So you're going to create a table just like this one here, all right? Super simple. You're going to have on one side Confederate, ignore the number 2, don't write that out. I don't know why that's there. But on one side, you're going to write Confederate victories and the other side, Union victories. And what you're going to do is look back at your information that you've noted down, okay, or go back through my stuff if you haven't noted it down properly. And you're going to write in the battles. Remember, there are a couple of things in there that weren't battles, so don't try and write them into the table because they weren't battles. So you're going to write the battles in each side of your table. Now, if any of them took place in between or didn't have an outcome, maybe if I change the wording there from in between, if any of them were inconclusive, there was one where there wasn't a winner, all right, then you need to write that across the middle of both because it's not a Confederate victory and it's not a Union victory, but it still needs to be on there and it can go across the middle. Okay, so once you've done that, that's the picture that you need to send me. And then we're moving on to our final task, which is our plenary, where we're going to recap on all of this information. So what I would like you to do is, using the information that you've noted down or going back through what I've written, I want you to tell me in full sentences, of course, what was the first battle in the Civil War and when did it take place? Where did it take place and which side won? You need to put that into a nice sentence, okay? So the first battle of the Civil War was the Battle of, it took place here, when, and this side won. Okay, so a nice little sentence on that one. And then you have got which side had more victories. So that's where you need to look at your table, and the side with more things written in it is going to tell you which side had more victories, isn't it? Okay, I want you to tell me how many battles did the winning side have? How many victories did the winning side have compared to the other side? And if there were any inconclusive battles and what they were, where they took place. Okay. Question 3, where did more battles take place? Did more take place on the Confederate side or the Union states? So you need to go back and look at where battles took place. Okay, and then do a little count. So just write out a little tally, right? Confederate and Union, and do a little count of all of the different things which took place in Confederate and which took place in Union. And then I want you to explain to me what the Emancipation Proclamation is. It's the keyword written at the start, and there is also a slide on it if you go back that we spoke about. And then your final thing to do today is, what was the last event of the Civil War? Okay, what happened and who was victorious overall? All right, so 5 super easy questions for you to do there, guys. All of the information is there. It's just about you putting it down in full sentences. That's what I'm looking for rather than the right answers, okay? And all being well, I will speak to you again for our next lesson, which we are looking at the consequences after the Civil War.